Thanks, Molly, for that introduction. I also want to thank ACE for inviting me to moderate this discussion. I have written about issues in diversity of higher education for a few decades, but there's another reason I agreed to step out of my normal role, which is sitting where you are in the audience. I was that non-traditional college student, a member of an underrepresented group who received Pell Grants, and I should add, federal student loans. And signing those loans at age 17 to start was scary to me. And although I was not the first in my family to go to college, I do belong to the first generation of graduates in my family. I want to introduce our panelist. Just a slight adjustment there.
I'm trying.
I'm not going to stand for the whole thing. To my immediate left is Cathy Davidson, a distinguished professor at the Graduate School of the City University of New York and director of the Futures Initiative, which is dedicated to, quote, advancing innovation and equity in higher education. In 2002, Cathy co-founded the Humanities, Arts, Sciences, and Technology Alliance and Collaboratory, commonly called Haystack, a network of more than 14,000 educators committed to changing the way we teach and learn. Cathy is a leading innovator of new ideas and methods for learning in the 21st century. Seated next to Cathy is Ted Mitchell, Undersecretary of the U.S. Department of Education. In that role, Ted oversees higher education, federal student aid, and 5 White House initiatives that pertain to Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, educational excellence for Hispanics, educational excellence for African Americans, historically black colleges and universities, and American Indian and Alaskan Native education. Other than that, he doesn't do much. Whether as a researcher, teacher, administrator, or policymaker, his professional career has been defined by his commitment to equity, and excellence, including being one of the first college presidents at Occidental College to advocate for public tuition assistance to undocumented students. To my far left, Waded Cruzado is president of Montana State University. She is an expert on the Morrill Act, which established land-grant institutions like the one she leads and widened access to higher education starting 150 years ago. At Montana State, she has created a Veterans Center, expanded and relocated to the Bozeman campus, the main Bozeman campus, a college that awards 2-year degrees and certificates and has made student retention a priority. I'm going to sit and I'll explain the format to you. We'll have 3 rounds of responses from our panelists. I'll sort of set the table for the first 2, and then in the last round, they will address what others have said on the panel about the issues of equity and innovation. I'm going to start with Cathy Davidson, and in this round, ask the panelists to talk about higher education, how it can and should fulfill the promise of equity in this era of demographic change. Cathy?
Thank you. 3 years ago, I was giving a talk at the University of California at Irvine, and the director of admissions was there. And in the question and answer period, we started talking about the contemporary student. And he said a number that haunts me. He said the average grade point average on a 4.0 scale of a student entering the University of California at Irvine is 4.1. Perfect scores, AP tests, perfect SAT scores, lots of extracurricular activity, if, of course, you're a California student. If you come from outside of California, you have an easier chance getting in. But I started thinking about what that means. And at the time I was teaching, I taught for 25 years at Duke University. And that demographic is similar, those qualifications are similar to my Duke students. I started thinking, what does it mean for our society that the key to admission is being better than perfect, and being better than perfect in a standardized, routinized, sometimes regimented way that was actually invented in the last century, in the 19th century. Standardized testing, 1914, Frederick Kelly, to deal with a teacher crisis with immigrants coming into the American school system. Right? Why is that? Why is that what we're still judging by today? And how can we get beyond a mentality of standardization to look at the best ways of teaching the incredibly diverse students that happen all over the country, not just at our top universities, but at all universities, the increasingly diverse students that are entering our universities? And how do we rethink education for the world we live in now, not for the 19th century? If I list all of the innovations to higher education that changed the Puritan university into the modern research university that happened between 1865 and 1925, I don't have to define any of them because they're still the basics of the world today and of the world of our higher education system today. I think there's three things we need to think about to really make an equitable education that breaks through the old ways we're teaching and reaches students today. One of them is by changing from teaching to learning and helping students have control of their own teaching, but also so that we can learn for the diverse styles of our students today. Not 4.1, but hundreds and hundreds of different ways that students teach. I came to the Graduate Center at CUNY to teach graduate students how to teach. All of my students are currently teaching. It's a self-taught course. Students take responsibility for their learning, and they go out into their classrooms that week, teach to the undergraduates, and we've invented a tool, developed a tool so that the undergraduates, whether at Borough of Manhattan Community College, taking pre-chemistry, or at Hunter College, can also talk about their learning styles and come to understand what different kinds of ways they learn best. Two, we have to change our system of assessment. Standardized testing that was invented by Frederick Kelly in 1914 can't be the way going forward. We have to have much more complex ways of using tests to form knowledge, but also to assess all of the different things that students learn in school. Collaboration, project management, time management, life management, skills that are not just vocational skills, but life skills, but life skills. Third, we have to find ways of supporting student success on the way out of college, not just on the way in. Right? We have to measure productivity by success going out, not just on the way in. At CUNY, we've been developing a system called ASAP that assists our community college students with personalized teaching, team teaching, but also helping with everything from Metro cards to scheduling at times that works for their very complicated lives. In 3 years, we've gone from about a 22% pass rate to a 55% pass rate among a similar cohort group by attending to students taking responsibility for their own learning in groups, reshaping learning so it's not about disciplines, and this is similar to what Amy Gutman is doing at Penn, but about how you read, write, think critically, do things creatively within the everyday processes of education, how we can integrate learning again. All of this is about, I think, not just thinking with technology, but thinking about the interactive, individualized, long-tail world that we live in today. Thank you.
Ted?
Thanks, Ken. And thanks, everybody, for being here. When the president came into office, he set a very high goal for all of us, which was to be first in the world again in conferring post-secondary degrees. And that's been an important North Star for the department as we've gone about our work, and I know that we've engaged with a lot of you in that. I want to talk about that goal in a slightly different way today, given the topic at hand. First of all, to get there, we've got a really big math problem. How can we take a system that is not exactly under capacity and really move more students through it and into success after college? But I think what draws a lot of us to the work, a lot of you to the work, is the fact that it's also a moral problem. It's a moral challenge, because if you think about who we need to educate to bring us back into first in the world, we need to bring into our systems the very people that Amy was talking about and that we've been talking about throughout the conference. First generation students, low income students, students whose K-12 preparation may be slightly lacking for college work right off the bat. People for whom their first language isn't English. Being able to solve that problem is, I think, the key moral challenge facing all of us in our work, and is a key moral challenge facing American democracy. And so how do we get there from here? I think we get there from here by innovating, by doing the kinds of work that so many of you are doing on a day-to-day basis, scaling that work up and making it matter for hundreds of thousands of students who today don't have access to high-quality higher education. So that's why we in the department have been focused on access, we've been focused on affordability, and we've been focused on quality outcomes. And we think that innovation in each of those three areas is going to move us forward as a nation. It's going to provide opportunities for students, and it's going to remake the institutions in which we all live and work in marvelous ways as we come to learn from and learn with an incredibly diverse pool of students. I think that the innovation that I'm talking about and that we're going to talk about today is well underway. The diversity of American higher education is one of its extraordinary strengths, and the ability of institutions to innovate, to create new models, to try new things is extraordinary. And I know that in just walking the halls here, we're all learning from each other. We're learning what's going on in Montana. We're learning what's going on at CUNY. And all of that is a part of how we spread the kind of innovation that we're going to need, not just to meet the president's goal, but to meet our goal for a democracy that is active and vibrant and an economy that's prosperous for all.
Thank you, Ted. Waded?
Yes, good morning, Ken, and good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us as well. When we talk about promises to keep, I use 2 points of departure. First, history, and then my personal story, right? And see, so what are the things that we need to keep in mind for the future? I have a fascination about the history of land-grant universities, and all of you are very much aware of it. 1862, it actually took an act of Congress to think in a bold manner, and that is, Congress finally approved a bill that had been in consideration for a number of years, which did something extraordinary, and that is, we established one public university in each state and territory of the Union. Not only in some places, not only in those states with higher population or better equipped, but in every state and territory of the Union, including my native Puerto Rico. So that was a big, bold idea. Second big, bold idea was that these colleges and universities were going to teach agriculture, engineering, not only law, not only education, not only the traditional professions. And thirdly, these colleges and universities were going to be open to the sons and daughters of the working families of America. Not only to those that could afford private tuition or who lived in urban areas, but to everybody. To me, that is a great source of inspiration. I also think about the fact that 1862 gave us the Homestead Act. So all of a sudden, when you think about that, then the Homestead Act gave us the geographical and horizontal mobility, But it was the Land Grant Act that gave us the vertical and socio-economic mobility. When I also think about that, I also consider that those homesteaders were the new demographics of the time. And I always ask to some of our faculty members who sometimes become too concerned about college readiness, I always ask, so how many homesteaders do you think were college ready? Right? But that did not detract us from what we needed to do. The second point that I use, it's yes, I was a first-generation college-going student. I was very fortunate. I asked Ken, so what took you from your native Denver to the East Coast? And he just summarized it so well. He said, opportunity. So I was fortunate to go to the Land-Grant University in Puerto Rico, then moved to the United States, and then all of a sudden, one opportunity after another, and I find myself serving as interim president of New Mexico State University. Then, and this is a true story, one good day, the phone rings. And it's a search consultant. And he says, we would like to have a conversation with you about Montana State University. And I said, I know it's a wonderful university, but you know, I'm very happy in New Mexico. Thank you so much. And I hung up. A month later, the same consultant called. And he said, now you have been nominated for the presidency of Montana State University. And I said, well, let me give it careful consideration, and I will get back to you. And this is where this is so important for the topic that we are talking today. Because the first thing I did was I went to my computer, went to Google, and I typed US Census, Montana. And I wanted to see what was the percentage of the Latino population in Montana. And I scrolled down. 2%. So my friends, I wrote back to my dear consultant and I said, thank you very much. I'm truly honored. This is not a good fit for me. And I hit the send button. And you know what happened? The phone rang again. Right there. And I remember lowering my head, and this is also important, not only for me as a Latina, but also as a woman, because women tend to second guess their ability a lot. And I remember lowering my head and asking him, what do you see in me that I'm not seeing? He told me your experience with land-grant universities, with multi-campuses universities, and your experience with underrepresented minorities. But it required someone else to give me that validation, as it requires someone else to validate so many women who today can be presiding universities, or so many minority students that have the aptitude, have the skills, have the knowledge, but do not have the self-confidence to say, I have a place in that university. I can sit in the front row, as the faculty member from University of Pennsylvania said, in that school. So our challenge is not so much about numbers. We can produce numbers. The challenge is, how do we instill in our colleges and universities the necessary culture so that our students, our underrepresented students, not only feel admitted, but welcome. And the same thing applies to faculty and to our staff and to individuals who are very talented and who can help us transform the face of higher education in America and fulfill that promise.
Thank you, Waded. And thanks for the history of the Morrill Act and the Homestead Act. I'm also reminded, coming as I do from Boston, that the colonial charter of the very first college on these shores also had equity, despite its reputation for many decades, as part of its mission. The colonial charter of Harvard set its mission as the education of English and Indian youth. That was in 1650, much before this country's egalitarian creed was actually articulated. And I appreciate, Waded, what you say about underrepresented students feeling welcome on campuses, because when we talk about technology and technology that has the professor one place and the students in another and interacting in a virtual world, I'd like the panelists to talk about how technology, which can be efficient, cost-effective, can broaden access, but on the other hand, not everybody has the same access to technology. I'm a big believer in the effective side of learning, and how does a professor, an instructor communicate through technology to underrepresented students. You do belong here. Yes, you can do this work. The kinds of messages that instill self-confidence to get through academic programs. Technology and education is much more complex than that, but we'll start in the same order and start with Cathy, who is an expert. She's our panel expert on technology. So Cathy?
Right. So this expert on technology often uses the very advanced technology of machine-made paper and machine-made pencils to talk about how to be more interactive in the world today. I'm very, very interested in the ways that we can get students to, and this just underscores what my colleagues here have said, to understand how to understand their own voice. So often, well, two things. In terms of actual online technology, we've created this open source network that networks all of our classes because our students can now communicate across other campuses and other courses. So the technology is not just about something top down, but it actually gives the students, for the first time, a chance to talk to each other. So I'm teaching 12 graduate students who are teaching 12 undergraduate classes that is across the entire system. But now, this just happened yesterday, a student in our classics program at Hunter College was being given advice for a required chemistry class that she was taking and some other, for one of her science requirements by science students in pre-chemistry at Borough of Manhattan Community College. So they were actually sharing their resources across this network. That's very, very different than a top-down use of technology. And I think it's much more the message of the internet, which is how I can take the particular thing I know, my superpower, and help somebody else who might need something, but who might also have a superpower that they can give to me. The way I use index cards in classes is something I learned from a second grade teacher, but it's also being used in medical schools. It's something called Think, Pair, Share, where I'll come in the morning, and my students now do that with their students, and say, okay, write down the 3 most vexing things for you right now, this moment, 90 seconds. 3 most important things, and we could have done this in this room. I often do this in large groups of people. 3 most important things to you that are preventing you from learning last night's lesson. The things that were that were the biggest obstacles to understanding what we did last night. Then they turn to somebody next to them and read out loud. Each person reads out loud the things on their card. There's something about that act of hearing your own voice in a classroom that I think is one of the most important lessons for equity, because we are terrible. We've done the research on this. Professors think that their classes are all communicating with each other when 20% of the class speaks. In Think, Pair, Share, everybody hears their own voice. They then talk with their partner about what thing they're going to share with the whole class. That's the share part. And then they go around the room and share it. That is a piece of paper. It's people interacting. But then we add another part where they also share that last insight with everybody else in this network that we've created. So there is, and it's public too. So they're also representing themselves in public. But the most important interactivity for me of the digital age is being able to hear your own voice, give feedback to somebody else, change your mind based on that feedback. The internet is way too much filled with pronouncements instead of actual interaction. That 4.1 grade is way too much about a product, not about finding your center and being able to articulate that center and be heard by somebody else. These are simple, inexpensive ways of being heard. I also don't require papers anymore that only I read. Everything my students do and that my students' do is now done so that it can be out there in the world. The way a student changes when something they've written gets a response from a stranger is maybe even better than anything I can give as a teacher. Or maybe it's the best secondary effect of what I do as a teacher, because it's saying to them, your education doesn't matter at some future time. You have a voice right now. You are contributing right now. The taxpayers' dollars that are paying for your education, education is voluntary. Higher education is voluntary. That you are making a commitment to your education is already repaying society. And to be able to find ways that they can understand and feel their own contribution, to me, is about them becoming, having superpowers and becoming citizens of the world they live in.
Thank you, Cathy. So Ted, tell us what the federal government is up to here with technology and innovation and equity. Maybe a little something, something?
We're having a lot of fun with technology in higher education and in education more broadly. All of you know that we inaugurated the first in the world grant competition last year to really provide some seed money to institutions who are looking to innovate in these critical areas of access, affordability, and high quality outcomes. And we had an overwhelming response. We had over 200 applicants, high quality applicants. We were only able to give 24 grants. The number one in the top pool, the number one pool was Hampton University. That is a great example of the use of technology in exactly some of the ways that we're talking about. So Hampton is revamping some of its courses using a flipped classroom model so that students will do some of their work, look at videos, some Khan Academy videos and some of the math courses, and then come to class and engage in a very different kind of dialogue with their faculty than they had been before. Waded, you talked about horizontal and vertical, and I think, Cathy, that's the theme, is that we're getting much more horizontal in our interactions. And so what Hampton is doing is making the classroom experience much more lively for their students with the use of technology. LaGuardia Community College was another grantee in First in the World, and their ASAP program is using technology in a slightly different way, not so much on the pedagogical side, but in sort of this really smart use of data about students to be able to catch them right before they derail. Not right after, but right before. To be able to look at indicators, performance indicators, other things that are going on for students, and to then be able to wrap support services around students. Again, all with this idea of inclusion and helping students feel at home. On the affordability side, not First in the World grantee, but Rice University has led the way with its OpenStax OER construction. I think that they believe that they've saved students over $30 million by moving.
Explain a little bit what that is.
Yep,
then.
it's doing peer-reviewed textbooks online for free. And being able to do that, we think about tuition, we think about room and board, but if you've been buying college biology textbooks lately, you know that increasingly textbooks are a big part of college costs. So I use that as an example of the ways in which, not kind of the big MOOCs, but whether it's student early warning systems, doing flipped classroom work, online textbooks, and I'll add one more. DePaul University has created a degree pathway software tool to enable students to actually see at any point in time where they are on their pathway to their chosen degree, what courses they need to take, how many of the prerequisites they've got lined up. So there's a small t technology revolution going on in institutions that I think is very promising as a way of helping institutions be more inclusive, more effective in the deployment of support resources, and more assistive in helping students get not only into institutions but across the finish line.
Waded?
Ken, I'm very proud of what we are doing in Montana in terms of technology. And I think in that sense, I need to say it's not only within the confines of Montana State University or our 4 campuses, but it's also in collaboration with other sister institutions, including our arch rivals to the west, University of Montana. We collaborate. We have partnerships. And the other part about that it's important for us to underline here is it doesn't stop in our walls. We need to establish bridges of collaboration with K-12 in terms of technology, and that's exactly what we are doing in Montana. In terms of equity, I want to talk about, well, of course, continuing the theme of the land-grant university. You know that after the first land-grant bill, we had a second one in 1890 that gave us access to African Americans to our land-grant institutions, and then a third land-grant act that was approved in 1994 that did the same thing for our Native Americans. In fact, there are 7 tribal colleges in Montana, and all of us have a designation as a land-grant university. So Montana is the state with the largest number of land-grant institutions in the US. Now, with that point of pride also comes a great point of responsibility. 6% of the population in Montana are Native Americans. So how do we reach out? How do we use technology to reach out to our Native American students, to our underrepresented minorities, and to students in general? And I think that the key lies in what Cathy was saying. What's underneath that technology? And it has to be engagement and interactivity. So, for example, one of the ways in which we accomplish that at Montana State is that we have this nursing program, which is an award-winning program, actually, I should say. Montana State University received the HEAT Award a few days ago. And the name of the program is Caring for Our Own. And what it does is that it reaches out through technology to our different campuses, our partnerships with other institutions that have nursing programs. And then, during the summertime, the Native American students take their newly acquired knowledge and they work in the reservations. What we have noticed is that then it makes that new knowledge relevant and it galvanizes their commitment to those communities, but also to themselves. Now, those students know, either when they are sophomores and juniors, that they will be making a difference in their communities. And the data is clear. Students that participate in that sort of engagement tend to persist and graduate at a much faster clip than students that do not. We have also taken that to the College of Engineering with equal results. The other part that I wanted to mention, and this applies to everybody, this is truly about equity. When Ted mentioned that we had a math problem, I really, literally think we do. And this is where technology has proven for us to be very successful. I tend to have this axiom, and it goes like this. Not every student that fails math will abandon college, but almost every student that abandons college has failed math. So what do we do in order to make sure that every student is successful in math? And this is where technology has proven invaluable. I'll give you just one example, and I'm sure that many of you have equal examples of success. Some 3 years ago, we decided to transform some of our math teaching or learning classrooms into what we call known as TEAL, Technology Enhanced Active Learning. The principle is very easy. Instead of having students sitting in a row, you have a number of round tables, 8 students maximum to a table, and instead of having the faculty member just solving the problems and the blackboard, every student has to solve the problem by himself or herself. And if they get stuck, they seek help from each other. And if the table cannot solve it, then they raise their hand and the faculty member comes. How successful has that been? Well, when we take a look at what happened in college algebra, we had a 46% passing rate. Statistics had equally a 46% passing rate. When we move students to the TEAL classroom, then that 46% in college algebra went to 80% passing rate. Statistics went up to 86%. Everything else remained the same. The faculty member, the textbook, the syllabus. But it's that engagement, that interactivity that technologies enables and allows for that has made a difference for every student at Montana State.
Thank you.
Can I make a comment?
Sure.
I heard a video recently by the great science fiction writer Samuel Delaney, who said something so moving, and it speaks to this, what we're talking about right now. He said when he teaches at Temple. Whenever he asks a question, he has every student raise their hand, whether they know the answer or not. And when he calls on them, they either say, I don't know the answer, but I think Waded knows it, and then Waded gets to speak, but they pass the baton. Or they say, I didn't really understand the question, or they answer. But his point is, every time someone sits there silent when a question is asked, they are learning how to be silent. They're learning, I'm a failure at math, I'm a failure at school. They're learning, I have no voice in the world. I have no agency in the world. So he says that simple act of routinely asking students to raise their hand is saying, I exist, I participate, I'm a member of this group, this community. I have something to contribute, even if I don't know this specific answer. That to me, if you look at this video, you can see it on YouTube, he actually weeps when he says that. He said, you're teaching people how to be passive workers. You're teaching people how to be failures. You're teaching people how not to succeed every time you reinforce silence. That's what I mean by the power of the internet is the power of interactivity and engagement, not so much the power of the technology itself. So even in situations where you have no money and no resources, everybody raise your hand.
And that's one of the ways we should evaluate all technology.
Absolutely.
Right? Is
Absolutely.
that there's technology that advances that passivity, that one-way communication, and that we should get rid of it right now.
Yes, absolutely.
And the design principles should all be about engagement and inclusion and expression.
Totally, because otherwise we're just operationalizing a 19th century Taylorist model of passive learning. You know, all we're doing is making it worse, not better for the world we live in now. And that's a terrible waste on every level. Sorry, could you say it again? I will find it for you. And, I think if you go onto Haystack and put H-A-S-T-A-C, and in the search tool write Samuel Delaney, D-E-L-A-N-Y, no E before the Y, you'll be able to come up with the video. I wrote a blog about it, and the video is included there. But if not, I can pass it to you, and you could distribute it to the member. It's a very beautiful video about his teaching, an interview with him about how he teaches.
Well, my panelists have already set in a little bit of interacting with each other, which is we're going to do in our final round before we get to questions from you in the audience. There are standing mics out there that you can queue up at and ask questions. But I also want to maybe frame this a little bit more than I have in the first 2 rounds. I hear each of you talk about things that work for all students, that have been demonstrated to work for all students. Waded, in talking about the nursing program and the Native American students, talked about the Native American students going back to Indian country and doing work there, and that helped them. The question is sort of, does what works for everybody seems to work for everybody. Is that good enough to achieve equity? Or do we have to have targeted programs of the sort that the Native American nursing students were using? Or do we need a combination of both? In some of my reporting lately, I heard different strains of thought on this question.
I think there's certain principles, like everyone raise your hand, that work across for all of us. No matter how famous, no matter how successful we are, there are always things about which we need to raise our hand. But I also think there's some real realities of everyday life that are almost ethical questions for how we teach and learn. So for example, in the ASAP program for community colleges at CUNY, we started giving students free Metro cards. It doesn't seem like a lot. It's the difference between making it to class one day or not. We started thinking about and using actually an online tool to figure out what people's lives were like and scheduling classes around their life instead of making students take their life and schedule them around their classes. Childcare. And we have a system of schools that were developed for farmers in the 19th century. What happens in the summer? What happens to your kids in the summer? We are not good as a nation at childcare and supporting them. So how can we have classrooms that also facilitate the everyday circumstances of life, which are far more dire if you're living at or below the poverty line? As much as we need to reform re-education, we also have to make the public, I saw this in an ad that came from ACE, fall in love with higher education again. It's appalling to think that there's this drone, this constant drum roll that higher education isn't worth it more. It's worth it twice as much now than it was for the baby boomer generation in terms of full lifetime earnings. We are cheating. We're cheating our students. We're cheating our children by saying that it's not worth it because it's already hard enough to be in school. And to have to be in school when the world's saying, oh, it's not really worth it, that's cruel. That's like child abuse. we have to stop that as a nation. We also have to be reinvesting in higher education. My dad went to school on the GI Bill. He would have owned a tavern under the L tracks, which is what his dad wanted him for if he hadn't been a veteran and gone to school in the GI Bill and had a different way and become an engineer who, at the age of 87, is still a consultant in renewable energy. A whole life changed. He keeps saying, the GI Bill allowed the greatest generation. What are we allowing now, right? And so both reforming ourselves and being as relevant as we can, but also being public advocates, which is what ACE does, and all of you do. It's been so inspiring to meet so many people here. Just in the last day that I've been here, reminding the public that that you cannot have a democracy, you can't have a middle class without higher education, and that we need to support higher education in every way we can. Thank you.
And it has to be a higher education that advances social mobility.
Absolutely.
And is an engine of social mobility and not a reestablishment of privilege in a variety of ways. To add to what Cathy has said, I think higher education is not only the best investment an individual can make, but it's the best investment that we as a society can make. And we all need to work together to, in particular, put states back in the game of investing in higher education. It has been a huge problem during the recession and the transfer of responsibility from states and federal government. We've tried to do our best to step in, but as states have withdrawn resources, that problem has fallen squarely on the shoulders of families, and it really impacts this discourse about the affordability of college, and the distribution of people who worry about it is not random. No. And so I think we need to do everything that we can to intercede in that. I think that, Ken, to your question about whether everybody ought to be treated the same, I think no is the first order answer. I think that equity depends upon an assessment of where people are, but an understanding that everybody who comes to an institution of higher education has a goal, and helping them move from where they are to that goal always has been a difficult proposition. But I think there are some category conversations that we can have about people who have different life circumstances. So people who need childcare, people who are going to school part-time and working, veterans who are returning home after arduous tours of duty, lengthy times away, and sometimes injuries. Each of those, we're getting better at thinking about things that work for each of them. We're also coming to understand that for everybody who is a college insider, there's a majority of people who still feel like college outsiders. And the terrific research and interventions that have been done around growth mindset and around micro-interventions that help students feel like they belong. Those kinds of things I think we're beginning to apply across the board. But to come back to technology, I think that what technology provides us is an opportunity to really do mass customization of what colleges and universities are like. Because we can now know where students are on their pathway to their goal. We can know the impediments that they've got. And we can be providing supports and interventions, figuring out their math problem, for example, on their way to credit-bearing courses. And that's tremendously exciting, and I think gives us a chance finally to live up to this idea that every person's higher education experience is different from the other person's, and that an institution can respond to all of them.
Ken, I think that when we approach education as a mass production enterprise, everybody fails. Or at least there is a loss in great opportunity. For example, back in the 70s, there was this great approach that took hold in our universities about self-paced classes. Math again, that's my obsession. And it sounds good. Self-paced sections sounds good, but you really need to peel the onion to find out what's going on. And why is it that in some schools, self-paced sections have such horrible attrition rates? I happened to be in a university in which that was the case, and I became concerned when I met with the faculty, and they told me with a straight face that they would administer the first day this exam, and they would know exactly, they could predict which students were going to fail based on their answers to question number 8. So we decided to deconstruct that approach, right? And we said at the time that underrepresented students need a more structured environment rather than a less structured environment. So we decided to make some changes in those sections, but you know what? What it's true is that when you implemented a more individualized approach, everybody won. Not only the minority students, not only the underrepresented students. So every time we take one of these customized approach, this is not only for underrepresented students, it's for every student will do much better. An engaged student, a student that feels that their needs are being met, are going to react in a much better fashion. Which then takes me to my point about equity. Few things rattle my cage. But when I hear people say that college is not for everybody, for everyone, it really does rattle my cage. Because bearing some extreme circumstances, I have come to believe that what you need in order to succeed in college is persistence, discipline. If you have that, even if you are not totally prepared, even if your IQ is not the highest, you will succeed if you show discipline and persistence. On our side, however, it's our responsibility to make sure that we don't think about our colleges and universities as a conveyor belt, right? Where the outputs are going to be similar to the inputs. Of course, give me well-prepared students, and I'm going to give you a graduate. But that's not what the magic of college education is. We are not conveyor belts. We are combustion engines. We need to take this student, underprepared, underrepresented, and something happens in the magic of the 4 years, hopefully, that they are with us, and out goes an incredible man or woman that will make a difference in our world.
Well, Ted, I have to credit you. I don't know if that's a brand new one, but that phrase, mass customization, is one of the finest oxymorons I've ever heard. Since something that's customized is sort of individualized, but you're talking about doing it on a mass scale. And Waded, that's quite different from mass production of the Henry Ford model of the 20th century. And following on what you said, Waded, I went to Washington University in St. Louis before it became as famous as it is now. But over the years, I try to encourage other African Americans in particular who are younger than me to go to college. I often tell them, say, hey, look, those people I went to college with that graduated, they weren't all geniuses. They worked hard, they were disciplined, they had a goal. You don't have to be a genius to get a college degree. Sometimes that message got through and sometimes it doesn't. I think there's been research actually that African Americans have an idea that to go to college and to achieve you have to be smart, whereas other people in other ethnic groups think of it as, you know, you didn't do so good on that test, so go work harder. There's something you can do about that. You can't, you know, the smartness or intelligence is something that's sort of fixed. You can't do anything about it, but if it's a matter of working harder, then you can do that. Now we want to take questions from you on the floor. And I'm told, although I have a little trouble seeing with the bright lights, that there are standing microphones, yes, in the center aisle here. And if you want to approach the microphone, it would be helpful if you say who you are and where you're from. And if you care to address your question or comment to a specific member or members of the panel, and don't let those standing microphones stay naked for too long. Now, this is an audience of educators who are asking students questions all the time.
It's just like our classes. The first question's always the hard one.
No, I think that means that you guys have answered all the questions.
I think you all better raise your hands.
Yeah.
Everybody raise their hand. Okay.
I want to ask a question as a mother of 4. I have a son who's graduating college this spring, yes, and 3 more little ones right now in elementary school. So my question is, and my background is from Germany, starting salaries in the United States are far behind other countries like Germany, which is 141% per GDP compared to in the US at 81%. What is your reaction to that, and where do you see opportunities to switch that to a much better number?
I think I better defer this to the federal government.
I was hoping you would.
I kind of knew that was going to happen. You know, I think the good news is that the economy has picked up over the last 12 to 15 months, and that both wage growth and job growth are accelerating. And it is our sense that will, barring external shocks, that will continue now for some time. And we think from an education point of view that it is one of the reasons why, and you'll forgive me for being on this horse again, why it's a great time for states to be reinvesting in higher education, to be able to create even more opportunity for more students to be able to get those college degrees, earn those middle-class jobs, and both individually and collectively increase the standing of the middle class and opportunities for the economy.
Hi.
Yes.
This question I think is mostly for Waded. You know, in focusing on the Land Grant Moral Act and its evolution, these were a way that we created new institutional forms to do higher education. And part of that's how we got to our diversity of current institutional forms, the Carnegie classification. Mm-hmm. As a leader who spent a long time in that hierarchy of institutional forms, do you actually see more diversity of institutional form in the future of higher education? Or do we have forms of, regardless of technology, innovation in the actual structure that will have more diversity 100 years from now than less?
Yes, I do. And here's the beauty of the land-grant universities is that the Morrill Act was just the first part of the triangle. As I like to say, so all of a sudden we decided that we were going to have these colleges and universities, we were going to teach agriculture and engineering because we didn't have the knowledge in the US to build the roads and the bridges. We were importing that from Europe, and basically we were a very hungry nation. We didn't know how to cultivate our land. So in came the land-grant universities, and soon enough, we opened the classrooms, and what did we find? We found that we didn't have much to teach because we didn't have the research. So Congress then gave us the Hatch Act, which established this wonderful tradition of research in our land-grant universities. And the third component, the third part, is that 20, 30 years later, we decided, okay, now we have access to students, now we have new knowledge that it's going to be imparted in the classroom, but what happens to the quote-unquote non-residents? What happens to those individuals who cannot come to our land-grant universities? And in 1914, we came up with the third wonderful congressional bill, which gave us the Smith-Lever Act, the establishment of extension. Now we're going to have an agent that was going to transmit that new information that was made possible through research to our distant locations. So my hope is in this wonderful tradition of research, of always pushing new frontiers, or of always searching for innovation, that land-grant universities will continue opening new doors for diversity. Diversity explained and understood in its very broad term, not only in terms of socioeconomic impact, but also in terms of gender representation, in terms of every possible aspect of diversity that we can think of. And we are called to be leaders in that sense. So I'm very hopeful that that will be the case.
Anybody else? At the mic, please.
Yeah, thanks. Paula Krebs from Bridgewater State University. And I wonder if the panel would address the widespread decline in support for humanities education in this current economic climate, and what the role of that is in relation to support for inclusion and diversity, as well as what the role of technology can be in supporting humanities. Many times when I hear about technology and higher ed, humanities is what falls off the radar. Fortunately, we have Cat and Stack here on the panel who can speak to that. But I would like to, I guess, hear you talk about humanities and diversity, humanities and inclusion.
Two things. One, I think if we're going to really talk about vocational training, humanities have to be the first thing we talk about. Right? Reading, writing, arithmetic, humanities have control of two of those. It's to not think that the way you communicate, the way you understand your history, I mean, these wonderful lessons you've been giving us in the Morrill Act help us understand who we are. That's a life skill. And I actually think that the drone against the humanities is part and parcel of the drone against the importance of a contemporary education and the importance of a college degree. So I think one of the wonders of the US university system is a more integrated approach where the basics of reading, writing, critical thinking, creative thinking are as important as actual skills training. And in fact, our skills, reading and writing are skills training. When Google studied all of its own, in Project Oxygen, all of its own employment data 3 years ago and crunched the data, what did it find? That people were promoted because they communicated well, because they played well with others, not because of their technology skills, but for all of those human skills that are part of the humanities. The other side of that is the humanities also have to be more responsive to the individual students and the cohort of students they're training. At LaGuardia Community College, there's a new language program. I think there's something like over 100 languages spoken by the student body at LaGuardia. And there's a new language program that's an inheritance language program where you learn a second language, which is basically learning your family's first language, which often as an immigrant in an ambitious family that's trying to get you into community college, you've left behind. And we're now working towards a humanities program that is also heritage-based and that moves out from that. One of my students recently had all of her students trace, she teaches Greek and Latin roots at Hunter College to 55 students, which I thought was astonishing to begin with. But she had all of her students do a map of the world based on the etymology of their first and last name. That's a fascinating way of understanding what the connections of history, the connections of both time and place are. And I think we need many more creative ways of thinking about the humanities as relevant to students' lives, because they often forget that reading and writing are the building blocks of the humanities.
So let me take a shot too. I mean, I do think that the humanities are undervalued in the current conversation about American higher education. I think that that's a tragedy. One of my former professors, when we talk about why one studies art, said learning about art is learning about how to make decisions in a world without rules. And in some sense, that describes the world that we're living in which not only are we not on conveyor belts, but there is this, depending on what metaphor you want, sort of a cloud of opportunities, a blue ocean of opportunities. How do people make decisions in that kind of setting? I think it's not only about finding their own individual voice, but it's finding an ethical underpinning, historical roots of where you came from, where we came from, an understanding of the basic philosophies that have and will develop to guide human existence and human interaction. I think that those things are more important than ever before. And if you look at the skills that, if you would then try to, if you want to operationalize those, you look at the skills that employers want. They want creativity, they want critical thinking, they want problem solving, they want collaboration. You know, they're not, at some point, they may be interested in a very specific programming language, but as you say about the Google employees, that kind of comes once you've made some fundamental decisions about a path. And the humanities are enormously helpful in generating that kind of growth in individual students. And then from a research point of view, it's critically important for humanists to help us tell our story as humans. And you know, that's where the humanities as research disciplines, I think, can really continue to inform our institutions as we move forward, as we embrace more diverse populations and more diverse communities. Telling that story and allowing students to develop voice is critically important.
Ted and Cathy just said it so well. I will just add, I have had an opportunity to serve 3 land-grant universities in 3 different states, and they believe in the humanities. So first I served in Puerto Rico, and then in New Mexico, and in Montana. And upon learning about my appointment in Montana, one of my best friends, and she's a geographer, she texted me and said, "Why is it that you only get to work in the most spectacular places on the face of the earth?" But it's not only because of the landscape. And I think that these 3 states have shown by their actions that they do believe in the humanities. So it's part of our role to continue to communicate the importance of the humanities, not only to our students, but also to the communities we serve. What can I say? It's exactly that. My background is in comparative literature, and I have ended up serving land-grant universities. So when people ask, is your background in agriculture or engineering? I say no. But my background in comparative literature has allowed me an opportunity to tell the story of the land-grant universities, to tell my story. But I also think it allows students to tell their own individual stories and to understand their place in society, and to understand and to give them a sense of meaning. There are many things that we human beings can live without, but we cannot live without a sense of meaning. Who are we? And our ultimate promise, the ultimate promise of higher education is not only that we are going to prepare competent professionals. Hopefully, we're also going to prepare engaged citizens and satisfied human beings. So we need to have a holistic approach to what we have to do.
There's the Nobel Prize-winning economist Amartya Sen says, yeah, of course, all higher education is vocational training. The vocation is to how to lead a good, meaningful, productive life. And I think
Good for him. All right, well, I see we got several people in one, but we have just time for one last question. I haven't been paying attention, so I don't know who was on first there, but whoever was, please ask your question quickly, and we'll get quick answers in, and then we'll conclude after we hear from Molly Broad
Great.
again.
Thank you. My name is Bridget Dwyer. I work at Villanova University, and thank you all for the work that you do and for your words today. I'm the director of the program on intergroup relations there, which is a program that's specifically designed to bring students together in small groups to have meaningful dialogue around social identities, so race, class, gender, faith. And I was in the SES class that I was facilitating last week, and I was talking with students from different socioeconomic backgrounds about, we got on the topic of campus and what was going on campus in terms of socioeconomic status and how people felt a part of the community and not a part of the community. So Villanova is located in a very wealthy area just outside of Philadelphia. And so our students from lower socioeconomic backgrounds really struggle sometimes with acclimating to that environment. And so we got into this really interesting conversation about how students were talking about they wish that there was more intellectual rigor, and they wish that there was more intellectual curiosity on campus. And what they were pairing that with was what they felt a push was by the university to really promote job placement. And so I wanted to hear your reactions and thoughts about these tensions, about how do we promote this intellectual curiosity amongst our students who are eager for it, while also knowing that our rankings are based a lot on our job placement, and especially for these students coming from these lower socioeconomic backgrounds, the job placement really matters for them as well, and for their families. Thank you.
I don't see those things as, I appreciate very much what you're saying, that students were worried about that, but I think in my world, those things are not contradictory, that we should be, I mean, our students should be able to get good jobs and be independent adults. I mean, whether they're traditional students who are making that passage from being legal minors in compulsory school systems to learning how to stand on your own, whatever that means, and in society, and support yourself and be a productive citizen, that's a huge transition. Or a returning person having new kinds of job skills in order to make themselves more viable. I wonder if the intellectual part of that and the creative part of that isn't similar to what Ted was saying about that beautiful definition, I wrote it down, about being an artist is actually learning how to make decisions in a world without rules. If we think about the first job as not the last job, but the beginning of an entry into a life where you're having to make your own rules and the rules are constantly changing. That to me sounds like it is the most intellectually challenging opportunity that you possibly can have. And so that getting job placement should be the first place, not the last place that we measure what our students' productive adult lives are.
So I just building on what Cathy said, and I didn't answer the question about institutional forms, so I'll try to wrap that in, and I know that I'm already over time. I think that this idea of the job being the first thing goes back, Ken, to what you were saying about fixed mindset, growth mindset. I think that all of us are works in progress, and we know that. Kind of the older we get, the more we're willing to admit that. At least that's true in my case. And I think that to prepare our students for a world in which they are going to continue to grow and change, and to the notion of success after college, what does it look like? It doesn't look like the first job, might not look like the third or the fourth job, but it looks like a journey, and it looks like growing and learning. And I think over time, our institutions are going to respond to that. And whether it's sort of the extension model or whether it's the adult ed model. I think that our institutions are going to be much more responsive to almost a subscription-based idea of higher education, where the students who are in your study group are going to come back because they're going to see a new opportunity, and they're going to need new skills, and they're going to need new things to help propel them along the way. And I think that that's a future that is, I think, really exciting, and one I hope we can all embrace.
Waded, you want to add one quick final comment,
Sure,
then we got to wrap?
I just think that part of the beauty of our job is to have the precious opportunity of breaking down silos and concepts and binary oppositions versus disciplines that will get you a job versus disciplines that won't get you a job. Again, I went into comparative literature because all I wanted to do, I wanted to read books. I did not expect to be a university president. Having said that, though, our job now has to be to inspire those students and faculty members to aspire, to stretch, to go beyond, to go to where they never had an opportunity or even an idea that they were going to reach. And also to help our communities understand that. Just one quick anecdote to end up with a happy note. When my name was made public as one of the finalists for Montana State University, I received a phone call from the newspaper. And there's this reporter, and the reporter's first question, and this is a true story as well, her first question is it true you're 5 feet tall? Well, yes. And then she asked me about my background and my aspirations for Montana State University, et cetera. And then you will not believe that her last question was, again, is it true you're short? And has the fact that you've been a woman been an impediment in your life? So I told her that when I was a faculty member, I used to have this poster of Garfield the cat. And with crossed arms, Garfield said, "I'm short, and I intend to stay that way." But I think that all of us, trying to wrap this up, all of us have a story that will inspire someone else, whether it's a student or a faculty member or that dean or that vice president that is thinking about serving the university in a different capacity. So our responsibility is to help them aspire to their highest level, use higher education and the promise it holds, no matter what your background is, no matter what the discipline you chose, we can all make a huge difference in the U.S.
You know, this feels more like the beginning of a very important conversation than the closure. But Kenton, Cathy, Ted, and Waded, thank you very much for a wonderful conversation.